Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the Iron Codex Chronicles. In this case, is our second uh, appendix. I'm here with Santiago from Cuarto de Guerra. Hola, Santi.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Tony, for having me over to do another of these great special episodes.
I mean, as long as Privateer Press keeps making Requiem Kickstarters, we will going to try to make these interviews.
Fair
And
enough.
speaking of which, we have here today Matt Goetz, the lead game developer from Requiem. Hi, Matt.
Hello, how are you guys doing?
Uh, Fine, thanks. And we were supposed to have
Awesome.
Loren, which is the lead play test coordinator, but she had some scheduling conflicts in last minute, so she couldn't be here. But don't worry, because
That's okay.
in the description below, we're going to link an interview that the guys from Try and True did with her. So if you want to listen to Loren, you can go there. And so before we start the interview itself, just to make things extra clear, Matt, what is exactly, or more or less, your work at Privateer Press?
So my title is the RPG Development Manager, which, Tony, you have a kid, right?
I do.
Or I remember you have like a 3 or 4 year old, correct?
It's about to turn 4, like by the end of August.
Oh, same with my son. So you know how you have to like follow your kid around and make sure that they're not like grabbing the dog by the tail or seeing how far they can jump off of a dresser?
Yes, or grabbing the spray alcohol and spraying it all over the house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the RPG development manager position is sort of like that, but instead of a almost 4-year-old, it's a bunch of books. Um, when it comes to the early phases, I brainstorm with Matt Wilson and the rest of the development team what the content is going to be, and then I coordinate with all of our writers and developers on what they're going to be contributing to the book. Um, I give them feedback on some of the development choices they've made, work with them if things need to get revised. And then later on, I work with the editors, I work with the graphic designers, just kind of seeing the whole process through from concept to completion.
Mhm. And in this comparison that you made, Matt, between coordinating the RPG development and being a parent of a toddler, what would be the pitfalls of your RPG coordinator? That is, what are the dressers and staircases that you have to avoid as an RPG coordinator?
I think being able to manage and track which pieces of what book are at what stage of completion is one of the biggest challenges that you're going to face. If you're not able to have like an organized and systematic approach to where drafts versus reviewed copies versus edit and editorial review, like you can get stuck in the weeds. I've got hundreds and hundreds of files, like individual Word documents tucked away into various subfolders, just so I can keep track of what's where and what part of the process. And even then, sometimes things fall through the cracks.
This show is not
Like a
sponsored
parenting.
by Microsoft Excel.
Yeah. Oh man. The number of spreadsheets I have on like cloud storage or on my desktop just to say, this is the piece of art that we're going to be using for this section of this book that I can send to our graphic designers to make sure that they know where things go in layout, right? Like knowing which authors are working on which sections of which book, etc.
Okay, so Santiago, do you want to start with the questions proper of the interview?
Yeah, sure. So, uh, as you may know, we are in the midst of the third Requiem Kickstarter campaign for the Iron Kingdoms RPG line, this time focusing on the Nightmare Empire. that is the Shard Island and the Creeks Empire. So would you, Matt, give us a brief recap of everything that has already been announced on the campaign, and what can we expect moving forward? It has advanced in a very lively rhythm, if I can say so. With over, I think you're approaching 300% funding goal. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. So obviously this is an expansion to the Requiem line. It's similar to what we did with Borderlands and Beyond, where there are 3 books that we're putting out, this time focused on the Shard Islands and Crix, so the archipelago off the west coast of the Iron Kingdoms. The 3 books are The Nightmare Empire, which is sort of a player's and setting guide for this part of the Requiem world. Then we have the Scoundrel's Guide to the Shard Islands. If you backed Borderlands and Beyond, we had the Borderlands Survival Guide, which included new rules and new monsters and stuff like that, that was presented from kind of an occasional in-setting POV, where you'd have brief asides from Alton Ashley and the people that he got to help write his in-world book. And we're doing that again, where the Scoundrel's Guide is sort of, it's like a conversation with Bartolo Montador, the Broadside's Bart, and some of the people that he knows, going into kind of the pitfalls and perils that people will face when they get into the Shard Islands. And then last, and a little bit different from what we've done with our adventure books so far, we have Tales from the Blackwater Cantina. In the past, with Legend of the Witchfire and Shadow of the Seeker, we presented like a single adventure that usually ran people from 1st level to 4th or 5th. Whereas Tales from the Blackwater Cantina is a compilation of 4 shorter adventures, and each one of those is built for a different tier of play. So at the beginning of the book, you've got Dead Men Tell No Tales, which is for that first tier of 1st to 4th level. And then you get into Chasing Shadows, which is for 5th to 10th level, and Shipwretched, which is for 11th to 16th level, and lastly, Pretensions of a Lich, which is for the 17th to 20th level of play. With that book, you can kind of have a campaign that spans the entire lifespan of a character or a adventuring company. You just need to be able to fill in some of the gaps between each of those individual adventures, using stuff like the local secrets that we're going to be releasing, some of the stretch goals there, or using some of the game mastering advice in the Scoundrel's Guide.
As someone who has to adapt the Shadow of the Seeker from 1 to 4 to 6 to 10, I really appreciate having official adventures from a higher level of characters.
Yeah, that was really born out of some of the comments from the backers, like you guys, where we saw people saying, we are interested in seeing what these higher level adventures look like in the Requiem setting. And like anybody who game masters, you take a little bit of what's officially printed and you put your own stamp on it and you dissect it and include portions of it in other later adventures. So hopefully giving people tools to be able to create some of their own material at those higher levels of play as well.
Speaking of these short campaigns that have names that don't seem very heroic, so to speak, the books have to seem this theme of evil, or at least morally flexible character and classes. Was that intentional? Is there going to be a guide to play quote-unquote evil campaigns?
I mean, it was absolutely intentional. When you've got an area called the Nightmare Empire, you're going to be confronted with, at the very least, morally gray characters. But I don't think that we're necessarily insisting on evil campaigns. Like, there are some classes that aren't even Crixian in this book, like the Knights of the Highgate Vigil, for instance, the people who watch the coast to protect against pirate incursions. And, like, despite the dragon blight and its effects on the people of the Shard Islands, I don't want people to be shackled into feeling they have to play, corrupt and evil bastards if they're from this region, right? It would certainly be on brand for what we've seen, but there's a whole lot of the Shard Islands that we haven't seen as well, and I'm all about empowering game masters and players to be able to play in the world in the way that they want, in the way that they feel comfortable doing, and not trying to enforce some sort of like strict ethos on them because that's the way it is in the world of the Iron Kingdoms. Like, whatever. You can take or leave as much of it as you want at your own table. Now, that said, in the Scoundrels Guide, we do have like some organizations and some groups that are a little bit on the darker side of things, a little bit more like neutral evil to chaotic evil. We have necromancers and that kind of thing, right, in the NPC appendix. But I don't think that we necessarily provide guidance on how to run an evil campaign because we don't want people to assume that that's the right way to play it, if that makes sense.
Totally. And to be fair, the Iron Kingdoms were, as I see it, never that clear cut, at least in regards to who are the good guys. There were never these are the good guys, and no question about it. You may say that the Iron Leeches and Toruk are probably definitely evil, but there was never such a clear-cut line on where the good guys are and the evil guys begin, right?
Yeah, like, but on the War Machine side of things, Signar is touted as sort of like the Boy Scout faction, but like they had the Inquisition, they have a lot of morally dubious background with them.
Yeah, not to mention Akin, that was so bad heart about his about a coup that he went and conquered a whole new kingdom just to come back to Signar and crush them.
Yeah. Like, just like in the real world, there are scions of heroism and dark-hearted knaves in every corner of the Iron Kingdoms, even the Shard Islands. It's just when you have Dragon Blight kind of scratching at the back of your sanity, sometimes the knaves get a little bit more violent or a little bit more overt.
So basically, you will be able to have a traditional adventure having Greeks as the big bad, or if you want to play a party of pirates or quote-unquote evildoers, you can do that. That's something new to Iron Kingdoms and something that we haven't seen in traditional D&D, right? Where your first mission is some lich sending you to raid a town because he needs new corpses to make thralls.
Yeah, but then you find out that the corpses that he's raising as mechanothralls are fundamental to like the Orphan Preservation Society of Grix or something, right? Like, you can have evil deeds that are built toward noble outcomes, and then you face yourself with that classic quandary of the ends justifying the means, right? Like, that's something I really hope to see when people are doing their own games and creating their own adventures, right? Like, not having those obvious moral right and moral wrong choices and outcomes, right? Like, finding the truth that lies somewhere more in the middle.
Also, you mentioned before there's going to be again this pattern of 3 books, which you have a player's book, which were Requiem, Borderlands and Beyond, and now the Net Empire, a game master book, which were the Monsternomicon, the Survival Guide, and now the Scoundrel's Guide to the Shard Islands, an adventure book, which were the Legend of Witchfire, Shadow of the Seeker, and now Tales from the Blackwater Cantina. What lessons have you learned from the previous campaigns and the feedback that you have received that you have incorporated into this latest iteration of the formula?
Well, we're always watching what people say. Like, I'm sure I'm on the Requiem Discord, interacting with people and listening to their conversations and trying
To watch,
to
you can
engage
find
with
a
them.
link in the description down below.
That's awesome. That's great. But there are certain things that are just kind of like a natural outreach to what we see from people, like, Tales from the Blackwater Cantina having various levels of play instead of just kind of one tier play. There was a lot of really positive feedback when we did Borderlands and Beyond about some of the optional rules that we included there. So we wanted to make sure that we have some things that allow people to, bolt add-on packages to their game of Requiem. But there are also things that we look at from the first Kickstarter and the Requiem Kickstarter, and it's like, a Monsternomicon is an incredibly useful book for players and also for us internally. What if we did another one, and instead of the Survival or Scoundrel's Guide, we decided to do another Monsternomicon? We're always looking at what people want and kind of checking it against the things that we know we want to do internally.
Santi, te toca a vos ahora.
Okay. So, going back to the items included in the campaign, besides the 3 books that are the main offering, the first Kickstarter campaign had a set of tiles as an add-on, and while the second Kickstarter and this one have miniatures as stretch goals, and there were encounter maps in the Shadow of the Seeker adventure that were different from those included in the Legend of the Witchfire, at least stylistically. What are the reasons behind those changes, and what can we expect in regards to Tales of the Blackwater Cantina?
So some of the differences you see there when it comes to the Witchfire tiles and the Corvus City tiles, I like them a lot. I think they're very useful, but they didn't seem to get a lot of traction with the audience when it came down to people who were adding them on to their pledges. And because we're kind of a lean outfit, we try and get the most bang for our buck when it comes to what we are able to produce that people seem really jazzed about and excited about. I think some of the tiles also harkens back to the previous edition, where it wasn't 5th edition. It was a proprietary system that wasn't played on a grid. It was played with tape measures and rulers and stuff. And back then, we basically needed to produce all the maps for every single adventure, every encounter that we put out, because there was no other way to play it. When you look at the incredibly broad ecosystem of 5th edition, there are map makers. People can use tools like Dungeon Draft, and really it's just a matter of an efficient use of our internal resources and artists to make sure that we can get illustrations of things like some of the NPCs in Blackwater Cantina, versus trying to produce maps that you might only use for a single campaign, when there are phenomenal map makers out there in the world of 5e that you can go purchase whole pre-made maps from, or just the assets you need to be able to create your own versions of these encounters. So we kind of simplified the maps in our adventures and didn't do the tiles because it seemed like people were already being served in that area.
So, sorry, Santi.
No, I was just saying that it totally makes sense. It's just like Matt says, the offering of third-party map, such as full-fledged maps or map-making tools and assets, is enormous out there. And with the advent of BTTs and online playing, it makes sense that Privateer Press redirects their resources towards more unique, so to speak, gaming aids, like miniatures that are more in line with their specialty.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point with VTTs. VTTs have transformed how a lot of people play role-playing games. I know that with my personal D&D group, I love the VTT that we use. It has a lot of modularity, allowing for plugins for like dynamic effects and dynamic lighting and shadows. One of the players has dark vision, so whenever we're in a darker encounter, he sees the world in black and white out to his dark vision range and stuff like that. But yeah, there are definitely areas that we can focus our strength on, and areas that we are quite strong, like in the miniature production. The reception I've seen to the Shadow of the Seeker minis has been like overwhelmingly positive, so I'm really happy to see that.
Speaking of a warm and positive reaction to miniatures, we have seen the Brain Troll, aka the Necro Shark, first as a piece of art and now as a miniature that got founded in like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And the Necro Shark is something completely new to the Iron Kingdom's lore in general, right? So, how much new stuff is there in these books that compared to pre-existing things from the previous edition of the RPG or of War Machine and Hordes in general?
Do you want like a word count or a percentage? It's difficult to say. There's definitely new stuff in every single one of these books that we're producing, new to the world of the Iron Kingdoms, like the Brine Thrall. You've seen it in the past in some of the Way of Deception monk, or the Way of the Gun in Borderlands and Beyond. And some of that is because 5th edition whole host of different class options, and in previous editions of the Iron Kingdoms, those things weren't really catered to very much, like the monk, for instance. So rather than say we're not going to support monks, people who want to play monks have to play like the Way of the Open Palm or something, we were like, well, where could we find an angle for them in the world that fits with previously established canon and is an interesting take? So there's definitely going to be a lot of that throughout all of the books, like random percentage, say like 20% never before seen weird new stuff, so that we can flesh out a fuller experience for the players and give us the opportunity to explore things that are cool and different, like the Brine Thrall, right? Like the idea of an undead shark that is like a living minefield is, I think it's kind of cool, and I'm glad that people responded so rapidly and so positively to it, and it just gets to add to the decades-long rich tapestry of the Iron Kingdoms as a setting.
And speaking of your rules on stuff, do you remember anything in playtest on the first drafts of the rules that was so broken or so out there that you just have to get it completely from books or change it radically?
Yes. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give a specific example because there's just been so many of them. Right. That's why playtesting is important, because you overlook a couple of interactions or something, and suddenly you have like characters that are walking nukes in battles, or characters who can literally never be touched, stuff like that. So yeah, there are absolutely broken rules and rules combos that happen almost at every stage of the development process.
So as you were saying, Matt, when you adapt a game world to a new rule set, you have to make a choice between allowing everything into your setting, or saying this goes and this don't go. You chose the most difficult, without a doubt, but I think that will be most appreciated path of allowing everything 5e brings to the table into the Iron Kingdoms, and that certainly may count as one of these pitfalls we were talking at the beginning of the interview, that you have to supervise every single interaction or count on the reports of your playtesting groups to spot unaccounted for interactions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are things that we're going to find years down the road that it just takes that long before it raises its head and suddenly becomes evident. And that's why games go through the process of errata, why edition updates happen. It's not just us, it's endemic to the entire experience of traditional tabletop games.
Yeah, if it had rules, it can be broken. That's a simple fact. And speaking of which, one of the things that Privateer Press introduced with the Iron Kingdoms RPG are the concepts of essence, to better exemplify the diversity of characters in the Iron Kingdoms. I've already told you in our previous interview that I think it's an excellent concept to broaden the scope of the available option for characters. Can we expect to find new essences in the Nightmare Empire?
Yeah, there absolutely is a new essence. It's the blighted essence, which adds to the list of options that are previously standing from Requiem. This is meant to represent people who are closer to Toruk or honestly Blightergast or Ashnafos. I think only Charsog is dead. I'd have to double check my notes, but any of the kind of blight fields that surround the dragons in the Iron Kingdom setting. So it's a little bit more dragon neutral than just a Toruk blighting, but it allows you to take some really interesting kind of eruptive aura. I think one of them allows you to sprout wings and have limited flight and stuff like that. It's a little bit more.
Has entered the conversation.
I think that this is one of the more physical versions of an essence than other ones that have been, a hybrid between physical and outlook and capability. Whereas this is like, you have been touched by blight. You now have the option to take these blighted feats to represent that.
And speaking of new things, in Requiem we got the first rules for labor jacks. Then in Borderlands and Beyond we got relic jacks and myrmidons. So can we expect rules for bone jacks and hell jacks in this book? And what about pirate jacks and other use from the mercenary factions?
So you're absolutely getting bone jacks and hell jacks. I think we've previewed the Death Ripper chassis already, but you'll have your Slayer chassis and your Leviathan chassis and stuff like that as well. Yes, there are some more maritime steamjacks as well. Some that you're familiar with from the Pirates of the Broken Coast book, your Freebooter, your Mariner, stuff like that. But also some newer ones that were created for Nightmare Empire to help kind of fill in the space between the naval warjack, laborjack kind of divide. So lighter ones at lower CR, so groups can more easily get their access to nautical steamjacks earlier on. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is the Windjammer, which is kind of a lighter laborjack, a little bit less combat capable than like a Buccaneer, for instance.
That's very nice, introducing labor jacks as a first step instead of giving the players straight up a warjack.
So I think we may go now to the lore-related question, right, Tony?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. We have a rather complete overview of the rules, and I think if we keep asking Matt for rules, he's going to start answering, I can't talk about it, I can't talk about it, I can't talk about it.
That's fair, though I do think we're going to be rolling out some more rules previews in the near future, kind of before the end of the Kickstarter.
Okay.
Awesome. So going to the lore-related questions. Besides Asphyxius and the Negra, Creeks had little explicit involvement during the events that led up to the claiming. Will the Nightmare Empire shed light on Turks and the rest of the Iron Leech's machinations during this period, as well as their current plans?
Yeah. As with the previous books that we've released for this edition, the first chapter is all kind of setting the stage of the world, and in this case, it's the world of the Shard Islands. So there's discussion there about what's Toruk up to, and because of the death and destruction that has occurred recently within the ranks of the Lich Lords, we talk about how some of the dynamic there has shifted with, for instance, Denegra stepping into Asphyxius's old position as one of the
Spoiler
Lich
alert.
Lords. That's been out for like a year now, man.
I know.
That was teased in our first Free RPG Day adventure.
And I go in the darkness. And then in the Henchhold scrolls, we knew that Asphyxius just stepped into the portal and went into the Ceres galaxy.
Exactly. But there's been some other shifts. Some people have been elevated to the position of Lich Lord. And there's always been points of friction between the Lich Lords because they're all kind of jockeying for their individual power. And we talk a bit about how some of those transitions have put certain Lich Lords, like for instance, I think Divinitus, the head of the Church of Toruk, is kind of chafing at the closeness Denegra seems to have with the Dragon Father, and speaking as like a mouthpiece for the dragon. So there's definitely some interesting things that you'll see in the book about where the powers that be are in the Nightmare Empire.
That was nice. So, and speaking of important milestones in the story, we know that the next important milestone in the story is the Orgoth invasion, number 2. Cador gets wrecked Bukalu. They were just out of Requiem trying to reveal, and suddenly you get the Orgoth invading like half the country from the coast.
Yeah, it's not a great time, let me tell you.
So, will the Requiem timeline, or the Requiem books in general, eventually catch to that point and are going to have like against Requiem Orgoth invasion or something like that? Or is Requiem always going to be like this intermediate period?
Well, that's kind of an interesting question, honestly. Like, is it possible that it could catch up to the Orgoth invasion that we're seeing? Yeah, absolutely, it's possible. But I don't personally like to think of Requiem as being a fixed point in time. Like, we've definitely, in the setting and background material, given you a fixed point in time, which is 617 AR, after the Henchhold scrolls finalized, after the battle there, and even a few years after. But I personally prefer to think of it more as that's the world as it currently exists. However, the role-playing game is a vehicle to tell stories at any point in the history of the Iron Kingdoms. So if tomorrow I woke up, this is purely theoretical, but if I woke up tomorrow and said, I want to write a story of the Orgoth invasion, there's no mechanical limitation to me doing that. Similarly, if I woke up and said, I want to write an adventure during the first Orgoth invasion, then I could do that too, right? Like, the tools of the RPG are not necessarily hampered by chronology. So I wouldn't say that we're ever going to be looking at catching up with the wargame side of things or being worried about falling too far behind. It's just Requiem has been presented at this particular point in time, and we're at liberty to tell stories at any other juncture around that particular point in time as well.
Quick follow-up question to this one, Matt, if you don't mind. So we can say that the RPG line follows the wargame history, but it's not necessarily tethered, so to speak, to it. But seeing how and I know this falls out of your area of influence, but seeing that how the war game side of War Machine and the Iron Kingdoms is progressing, can we expect the RPG line to be used as a sort of conduit to advance the timeline or the events in the Iron Kingdoms history, sort of what the War Machine and Hordes books did back in MMK2? Kids, ask your parents about MMK2.
I mean, you can see us having done that already. Legend of the Witchfire, it gives us perspective on Alexia and Omodamos and a number of other characters. Shadow of the Seeker gives us perspective on kind of an advancement of what's happening in Ios. So I guess the short answer is yes. We have been doing that.
Okay, I'm true. That's totally true. What I wanted to ask is that will the RPG line be used as a sort of main channel to advance the narrative of the Iron Kingdoms, or it would be an option? It may go through the RPG channel or through the wargaming publication.
I mean, it's definitely an option. I don't know what other vehicles are being considered at the moment, but I would say that the story of Requiem and all of its expansions are and will continue to be an option for showing advancement in the world.
Okay, that means that everything that gets published in these books is canon to the main War Machine timeline, right? Because we have seen Carly, which was a Riot Quest model, appears in the GM toolkit as an NPC. It does mean that she's quote unquote canonized into the main timeline through this working book.
Yeah, 100%.
Because we're going to Greeks, and Deadcheck already has working rules, and there's this really old guy called Karchev that seems to have fallen into an intimate relationship with
with the Skulls of Hate.
Yeah, so
See, I thought you were going to hit me with a Master Gurglefox, because in my mind he's 100% canon in Crix somewhere. So when it comes to the Riot Quest timeline, like the sort of Saturday morning cartoon, the world blew up, the Infernals won, and now these are just the scraps that are left behind. Like that's a what might have been. But the characters in it are characters that are in kind of the prime setting of the Iron Kingdoms. If you remember the initial Henschel Scrolls, we had a cameo appearance by Wendell, the weird Wendell character in Riot Quest. He was a little bit different. He wasn't like slingshotting gremlins at people, but he was there. And our justification is, people like Carly are there. I absolutely want to write an adventure that involves Black Bella, the Duchess of Dread, as one of the primary antagonists. I think that, except for things like Mechano Shredder or Mechano Lilith, maybe, you can assume that characters in Riot Quest have some form in the Requiem timeline. It's just that specific expression might be a little bit different.
So you heard of Karchev 2 is canon in War Machine.
I mean, I might get in trouble if that's the takeaway here, but can't take my words back.
Okay. So 2 last quick questions. First, you have been releasing several DLCs, as you call them, to fill the spaces within your releases. We have the Doom Reavers, the Man of Wars of subclasses, and the last one was the Black Clad subclass that quote unquote replaces the Druid, because you had some mechanical stuff from the traditional D&D Druid that didn't quite fit, so you went on and created the Black Clad class. what else can we expect from these DLCs? They're just going to be classes and subclasses, or can we expect short adventures or rules expansions like, I don't know, the ultimate book of Signal Warsharks?
So I think that some of our initial offerings have been very player focused in the classes and subclasses, but that's by no means the only thing you're going to see. There's definitely room for, and currently in the works, things that include like new Warjack chassis. There's the Tharn race DLC. It also includes a subclass, but the real meat and bones of that one is this is how you play Tharn in the Iron Kingdoms. But there's really no limitation to the type of content those could be.
Finally, how have the latest free RPG Day offerings been received? Can we expect these kinds of products to keep being available for backers and/or later be sold on the PP web store?
So, as far as I'm aware, they've been received well. I haven't had a lot of opportunity to talk to people who've sat down and played with them. A couple of my friends have hit me up on Facebook to let me know that they ran through a Strange Light Breaks, for instance, and gave me some anecdotes about the fun they had there. I haven't been in a position at like a show to kind of pull the gen pop to see what the opinion is. I mean, hopefully people are enjoying them because I like writing them, and I feel like they're a good tool to, introduce the Iron Kingdoms to heavy players that might not have ever encountered War Machine or Hordes or the previous editions of the RPG. And, I think the second part of that was, do we expect to be able to provide them to backers or sell them? Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. One of the particulars of Free RPG Day is there's kind of a period of exclusivity where the stores that have decided to participate in the Free RPG Day event have an opportunity for first run at all of these adventures. So it can get people into the stores, get them playing these new games, and establishing a good relationship with their local game store. But once that exclusive period is up, then, as you saw with the first one, I believe we made it available to backers generally for Requiem, and I don't know if there are plans to sell it on our page or just release it for free. I don't know where we are with that yet, but I do know that we're planning on making it available in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be our main concern, that those kind of offerings that build up on the Iron Kingdoms RPG experience don't get lost in the yeah, in the seas of time, so to speak.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, no matter what, even if every last physical copy of um, Echo in the Darkness, for instance, is no longer available. Like, I don't even know if I have a copy of it anymore. But the PDF and the layout files still exist, right? They're still on our servers. And enterprising people like Tony, I'm sure, can find an amicable printer somewhere in their local vicinity to take a PDF and turn it into something that you can sit down with at the table.
Can confirm.
I might be calling you out just a tiny bit for having physical copies of Borderlands and Beyond before I did.
I mean, it's not my fault that the imports and exports here are so expensive that actually, I mean, if I mean, I can get the PDF for $50, like you see in the Kickstarter, right? Or the books for
Mhm.
100 plus $80 of shipping plus a 50 plus another 75. No, that would be another 19 taxes, right? Or I could
Mhm,
just send all the books to print for $20.
No, it's just I was a little bit jealous seeing you with your copy, and I'm like still several months out of getting one
Yeah.
for myself. So
Also, to be fair, they are not quite the same quality as the actual books because they don't use
sure.
illustration paper. They use just matte paper,
Mhm.
so the colors are less vibrant.
You're missing out on those premium deluxe bookmarks, man.
I did offer you, Tony, the option to having them sent over here to Uruguay, which is much easier in regards
yes,
to books.
but still it's another $80 of shipping and 50 of the Kickstarter.
Ah, well, yeah, it's not that expensive, but well, okay, at least you save on taxes.
Santiago, I think what he's saying is that you need to start like some sort of expedition train to him. Just your pack animals piled high with copies of Borderlands and Beyond and Nightmare Empire.
I can receive as many books as you want to send me, and I would gladly cross over to Argentina to deliver them.
Because
I'm all for that.
Another thing that it's rather sad is that I can't actually buy things from the Privateer Press store, because when I put my address, it said, "Sorry, we don't ship to that place." Which
I did not know that.
No, I was digging a bit, and apparently USPS doesn't offer in their because I know Privateer Press uses USPS, which is the public mail system in the United States, and they have like this corporate package and that they use for all companies that use USPS, and they have a list of countries they don't ship, and Argentina is there for some reason.
That doesn't seem fair to me. I'm sorry. If I had the ability to sit down with the Postmaster General, I mean, I would have a lot of things I'd want to talk to him about, but I would definitely bring that up.
Thank you. Or since we're going to the Nightmare Empire, there has a bunch of pirates. And the company is called Privateer Press after all.
Yeah, right.
We can start smuggling things in here. That sounds
like I said, books are very much well received in Uruguay.
I'll keep that in mind. And this is on the record, so yeah.
I think things that happen when you the British mediate within you and Brazil for some territory you can agree on. They come and say, nope, this is now an additional country. Deal with it.
Well, I've been wanting to get back to El Desemboque for a long time. So if you ever find yourself on the coast of Mexico, look for a rock that doesn't belong there. And
okay, we will send Ben then.
Look for the skull and crossbones.
Yes. Okay, Matt, we know you have to go right now, so thank you very much for coming to this little interview.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Okay, I can't wait to see you next time, same time next year, so for the next Kickstarter. And remember, down here in the description of the video, you're going to have a link to the Kickstarter campaign, to the Privateer Press store, if your country accepts books from them, of course. So you can buy the original working books and Borderlands and Beyond whenever they're ready. And we're also going to link your interview with the guys at Cuarto de Guerra, and your other interview and Loren's interview in Tried and True. They were also very recent.
Oh, excellent.
And talking about this very thing. So if people want to have a more complete picture of everything. So yeah, that's going to be it. And everyone who yes.
I don't know when you're planning on releasing, but we have 7 days left on the Nightmare Empire Kickstarter. So that means it'll be wrapping on the 20th of July. So
it's going to be 6 days if you're watching this video as it releases.
Okay. So you want your zombies and your pirates and your pirate zombies, get in while the getting's good.
Yes. We can also leave a link to the TV Tropes page of Pirate Ninja Zombie Robot, because that's basically
that might be helpful.
Yeah.
That is very much basically correct.
Yeah. So, okay, once again, thank you very much, Matt, for coming. Thank you very much, Santiago, for helping me putting this little show together.
Thanks a lot for having me over again, Tony, and thanks again, Matt. It's always a pleasure chatting with you about all the Privateer Press project that you're in. And as Tony said, I hope we can get together again for the next campaign for the Iron Kingdoms RPG from Privateer Press.
I hope so too. Both of you guys are, like I said earlier, always a pleasure to speak to, and I can't wait to do it again.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye, everyone.